Well, welcome to those of you who could join us this evening. This is an event called Dealing with Extreme Weather, and it's an informational preparedness workshop around dealing with the extreme weather that we have during the winter months. I'll quickly go over tonight's program. Right now we're in the welcoming part, and then I'm going to go ahead and introduce our lovely panelists that we have with us this evening. I'll cover what extreme weather is and how it's related to climate change. Our first panelist, Caleb, will talk about health impacts and extreme winter weather. Arlene will talk about some preparedness during the winter months that you can do with your family, your community, and yourself. And then Lauren will talk about keeping warm, your rights as a tenant. And I'll quickly wrap up with some stuff around building resilient communities and what Crew does to contribute to that. So to give a better introduction of all of our panelists, the first person who will be speaking is Caleb Dresser, emergency doctor. Caleb is a fellow in Climate and Human Health Department of Emergency Medicine at the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, and is also affiliated with Harvard Center for Climate, Health, and Global Environment. Caleb's current work focuses on the means to address health needs during and after climate-related disasters. Our second speaker tonight is Arlene McGoon from FEMA Region 1, which is New England. Arlene began working for FEMA back in 2008. She's been deployed to many disaster locations in New England and around the country. And each development had a long-term recovery plans that were developed with the unique community needs for the people that she served. And Arlene is currently part of the National Preparedness Team and develops high quality preparedness programs, trainings, and actions for schools, faith-based communities, civic organizations, and vulnerable communities across New England. Arlene has also received many awards, including the 1999 SBA Woman Advocate of the Year, the National VOAD 2004 Innovations in Disaster Recovery, and she is a two-time winner of the Regional Toastmasters International Humorous Speech Contest. I'm gonna have to hear one of those speeches one day. And our final panelist is Lauren Sampson, who is the staff attorney for Lawyers for Civil Rights and the lead coordinator for race, climate, and justice programs for Lawyers for Civil Rights. So without further ado, we can get into the extreme weather portion of part of tonight's event. And we can start with kind of climate change. Many people are probably aware of what climate change and global warming is, but we're going to cover it pretty briefly here. So climate change is the long-term shift of weather patterns in different regions or as the world as a whole. But to better understand it, we need to kind of separate the difference between weather and climate. So weather is what it's like outside for a short period of time at any given place. It could be that this nor'easter that we've just experienced and the snow that came with it and the subsequent kind of sunny days. Whereas climate is weather patterns over a long period of time in one region or in larger regions or the whole world as an example. So for example, you know, Chicago is generally colder and snowier in the winter, and that's part of its climate. Whereas down south, you have more humid temperatures. There's very little snow, if ever. So that kind of is the difference between climate and weather. One is smaller picture and one is kind of larger systems picture. Climate has always stayed relatively constant. Significant events and changes in climate usually took place over thousands of years, but due to human greenhouse gases and emissions, the whole world is kind of heating up at an unprecedented rate. And this has been changing weather patterns, so what we experience on a daily basis. So our climate is changing because mostly of the greenhouse gas effect, in which it starts with the sun and heat. And light, you know, comes through our atmosphere, hits the earth. A lot of it is absorbed, warming up our planets and our oceans, and then heat radiates off the ground into the air. Some of it makes it out into space where it kind of just dissipates and disappears, but a lot of it is absorbed in our atmosphere, and those are called greenhouse gases. And that heat sticks around and makes our planet warm. If you could think of it like a couple of blankets around a bed, and there's a perfect medium to that, right? If we had no greenhouse gases, the Earth would be a frozen moonscape. If we did have too many, like we're getting to right now, you can see that heat is getting trapped within our atmosphere and leading to a lot of other environmental issues. So we've had this increase in greenhouse gases. A lot of this stuff is carbon dioxide, which could be produced by our cars. You have methane, which could be produced through farming, and then there's a variety of other emissions that we create through burning coal, oil, and gas. Another important thing to keep in mind is that this pattern is cyclical. So a lot of us think about the melting ice caps. When you look at that picture we just saw previously of the polar bears kind of stranded out there, when those ice caps melt, we're losing a very important reflective surface on our planet. So the more ice that melts, the less heat and rays from the sun are able to be reflected back out. And then our ocean in turn absorbs that heat, and that warms our oceans, which has drastic effects on our weather. So that's kind of the next point, and where it gets closer to our everyday lives, is that as the planet begins to warm, this unnatural heating of the oceans changes our jet stream. What the jet stream is, if you can imagine, it's like an air current that circles the whole world like a belt. And this jet stream is responsible for all the changings of the seasons that we've been so used to. So here in New England, we have very distinct seasons: fall, winter, spring, and summer. And the jet stream plays a major role of, bringing those weather patterns at those specific times. And when the ocean has been heating up, this has caused the jet stream to become really unstable and sort of wavy. And what we get there is it forces warm air to move further north than it normally would, but also can randomly move cold air further south. And this happens in really unpredictable ways and at unpredictable timings. So this is when you start to kind of imagine, all of a sudden it's been 40 degrees for a week, and then we get hit with, a -2-degree day out of nowhere. That can be because of this wavy jet stream, cold air kind of coming in unpredicted in large quantities to the south, and then all of a sudden it's gone. This has a lot of impact and disruption on natural cycles. So animals have more trouble figuring out when to migrate or when to hibernate. Trees sometimes begin to wake up out of their winter slumbers, and then all of a sudden are hit with some cold weather and kind of go into shock. But it's important to think about how this impacts us as humans. So there's different types of extreme weather events that we typically see here in the New England area. And some of the most probably well-known and that we've recently experienced are nor'easters, which are large storms that kind of travel along the East Coast with winds coming up from the Northeast. And then these can cause extreme winds and heavy rain and snowfall because they're actually hit by low pressure systems that are coming off the ocean. And these make these really large, almost, really large extreme storms that bring a lot of snow, like we just saw, high winds, a lot of ice. And then you have another phenomenon called cold snaps, which is, kind of what I was referring to when cold air moves south very suddenly. It's a sudden brief of extreme cold weather. These effects include high rates of mortality because people aren't prepared for this. Like I said, it could go from 40 degrees to all of a sudden 20 degrees within one day. These cold snaps can be really dangerous and unpredictable. And one of the largest kind of climate extreme weather impacts we're seeing is increased precipitation. So increased snowfall, increased rainfall or sleet. And this is important to consider. Even as our winter months may start to change and become less hot, we are still going to be experiencing this increased precipitation. And that's really important to think about when it comes in terms of flooding and our ability for our towns or cities to deal with that excess of water. Oh, my bad. So there's going to be more rain and snow on the East Coast. It's going to go up by around 70%, as you can see in the New England area. And so climate change, is not only bringing things that we typically think of like sea level rise, but it's also going to bring a lot of this increased precipitation-based flooding. So because of this, we're going to see an increase in bigger winter and spring storms. Like I said, it doesn't always have to be cold weather. It could just be increased rainfall. And a lot of the warmer air that is now in our atmosphere is going to hold more moisture. So that's why you're going to see these increases in precipitation, and those events are going to be stronger. You know, in the last 25 years, we've been seeing an over a 1% increase each year in how much water is dumped during a typical storm. Sea level rise is also going to exacerbate the effects of winter storms because of backflooding. And like I said, pressure systems coming off the ocean, that's going to increase more as the ocean level rises. So there's a 10% annual coastal flood risk. And that's expected to flood every 10 years with a big kind of freak storm. This is, you know, land that you wouldn't see normally underwater. These are freak storms, but this is going to go up by 10% by 2030. You can see it happening here, going up another 10%. You can see the water creeping in further inland. Like I said, this is going to increase the amount of rain events. And then by 2070, you can see how it's moved in quite a bit. And this is what kind of that stuff looks like in real time. I don't know if I can get this video to play. This was in 2018 in Pico Ave. Having some problems with the video itself. Here we go. So a lot of backflooding you can see coming from the ocean, frigid ice water there. So this is what we can expect to see. This is, you know, normally is like an every 10-year storm. Now we can kind of expect to see this stuff a little more frequently. Here's another video of some icy flooding.
The water is now starting to splash over the seawall here in Winthrop. You can see the water around foot deep as the SUV scours its way through. And this is all just happened within the last few minutes. The Massachusetts State Police after
and that is, you know, for the sake of time, we can't watch the whole video. I'd highly recommend that you look up this kind of stuff, especially because it's local events. But a good point to mention is that this stuff can happen, you know, in a matter of hours. We can witness extreme storms like this. And that brings us to our first panelist. Caleb Dresser is going to